discussed in this webinar today, but let's go ahead and get started. So today we will be talking about how to avoid common mentoring program pitfalls through TA, also technical assistance. Okay. Here we go. So welcome, welcome, welcome. If you haven't already, please introduce yourself in the chat box. You know, these webinars are also meant for you all to network, get to know one another, collaborate. So feel free to introduce yourself, tell us where you're coming from, what you do at your job, and also, you know, show your face if you feel comfortable. We want this to feel as much as in person as possible. So please feel free to have your camera on, but do stay muted until it is time to discuss. Okay. So let's begin with talking about who is Maryland Mentor. So Maryland Mentor is an affiliate of Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. We're one of 26 affiliates, and we actually relaunched about 3 years ago now. Wow, we just celebrated our 3-year anniversary. So what do we do at Maryland Mentor? Our goal at Maryland Mentor is to close the mentoring gap. 1 in 3 students do not have a mentor outside of their family. And we all know, which is why we're here, that mentoring is very critical in a student's life, in a youth's life. So we want to help make sure that we close the mentoring gap by doing trainings like these, helping mentoring programs, potential mentors, teachers, you know, whoever can take on the mentoring role to help them understand how to provide quality mentoring experiences for the youth in their life. We put on trainings, we put on events. You can find all of these. We have actually a couple of trainings coming up in February, March, and April. You can find that on our calendar, on our website. I'll drop that link in a minute. But yeah, so what will we be doing today? We will be having Dr. Bridges give us a webinar on how to avoid common pitfalls, mentoring program space. So what does Dr. Bridges do? He's been an educator for 15 years. He's also been a basketball and football coach for 10 years. So he's very active in the community. He's been a TA provider for Maryland Mentor. He's such a great asset to our team. He's also published research on leadership mentoring and was a former program manager. So we are really lucky to have him give us this webinar today. So what are today's objectives? We will be defining common pitfalls. We'll be identifying different approaches to them. We'll be identifying common pitfalls as well. And then we will have some active activities in breakout rooms and then learn how to avoid these pitfalls. So Dr. Bridges, feel free to take it away.
All right, thank you, Olivia. Can everyone hear me? We're good to go? All right, sounds good. Well, good afternoon to everyone. I want to thank you all for taking your time to come out and be a part of this webinar, this training. This is a pleasure. I first want to thank my brother Sadiq Ali for allowing me to do this webinar with you all. And I also want to give a shout out to the Maryland Mentor team. I always say that we have the best team in the land. And I definitely want to give a shout out to Carlos and Olivia for helping me with the working with this PowerPoint, the last minute, trying to get the last changes and edits done to this. So I definitely appreciate y'all for your time and all your support. And today I'm really looking forward to not only providing some of my experience and some of my training, but also learning from you all and making this a little bit more personal as we talk about some of the common pitfalls that programs are facing through technical assistance. And my background, basically, I was born in California, Oceanside, California. I come from a military background. I attended HBCU, Russ College in Mississippi, and most of my family is from Mississippi, so I claim Mississippi as my home. I have a master's degree and a doctorate degree in organization leadership. I've worked with the National Organization of Concerned Black Men as a program manager, and I've also been a coach for several years working with youth, coaching football and basketball, so I have a lot of experience with working with youth. And I also did some research. I did a qualitative analysis or study on mentoring, and I looked at the leadership that mentors use. We looked at transactional leadership, transformational leadership, and path goal theory leadership, and how mentors utilize those different leadership skills to interact with their mentee. And so definitely glad to be here. That's a little bit about myself, and we can go to the next slide, Olivia. So we wanted to start off this morning with our disclaimer. Let me see if I can blow it up here a little bit. Can't really see it on my end. So the trainers should not be viewed as the rendering of legal advice, and programs are strongly encouraged to consult their legal counsel and state local laws prior to implementing the recommendations from this training. All right. Next slide. So this evening, what I wanted to do is kind of start out with a group activity. And what we're going to do is we're going to break out into some rooms here. And what this activity today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the 86,400 activity. And when we come back, and I'll give you a little information about what we're going to be doing here, but and some instructions on how this activity will work. But prior to me doing that, one of the things that we did in one of our meetings with Maryland Mentor is Sadiq started out with a poem. And he read this poem at one of our meetings, and I thought this was fitting for our day. And the poem is by Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, and it says, "I have only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it, give an account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it." And so that message really applies to some of the training that we'll be going over, the webinar and some of the components that we'll be covering today in terms of what organizations do and how they conduct their activities and things on how to save time, resources, and also when we look at how we work with our people, our participants. And so today, this activity right here is like I said, it's called 86,400 seconds in a day. And what we don't invest wisely, we lose, and what we can't save time for later. And in today's activity, you will be divided up into groups. Each group will have 86,400 seconds to spend, and money to spend. And the money is equally divided amongst your group members. The group has 7 minutes to complete this task. The only restrictions is that each group has to spend all the money in one day. You can't save it. I know everybody would love to kind of have some time to do that. Each participant has to state how they want to spend their portion of the money. And the group has to need a recorder to record and write down the responses from each participant. And once everyone has shared, the group will come back as a big group and we will discuss some of the financial and social benefits of y'all decisions that y'all make. So can we kind of break out the rooms here and divide them into, I'm not sure how many we have here today, so I will let either you, Carlos, or Olivia kind of take over from the spot to kind of break us out in the rules, and then we can, if anyone needs some additional assistance, we can kind of provide that.
Okay, you should get a message to join the breakout room now.
Hello?
Hey, Olivia, you there?
Hello?
Hello? Yes.
Oh no, I'm just wondering. I just got quiet. Just wondering everybody.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for Dr. Bridges to go ahead with the next portion. But did you all enjoy that activity? I'm interested to see how you all were.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
It's never enough time though, but
It was never enough time. Yes.
Right.
Yes, it was fun and interesting.
Okay, well, I guess while we wait for Dr. Bridges to come back, we can go ahead and start with these discussion questions. So whoever wants to share from each group, we can start with question number 1. You all are just talking about time. How did time affect your decision?
Rush.
Okay.
Rush. Okay.
It made me a quick thinker, because I know we was rushed, but when you're under time or you're under pressure, you really have to, like, I guess, think of creative ideas or think of effective ideas. So it got me on my feet as far as brainstorming.
Nice.
And it also made you think that if you were doing a proposal like that, you would have to rush. If they gave you a certain time to spend that kind of money, you would have to brainstorm real quickly to spend that money in a day.
Very true.
When you're working to open a mentor program, to start a mentor program, it was like we were starting from scratch.
Right.
Am I still here?
Yes, there
Okay.
you go.
Okay, I was trying to figure out, I was trying to add something to the conversation, but I wasn't sure if y'all could see me. But the reason, and I don't think I did a great job in explaining what I guess some of the criteria was, but you could come up with anything. But since we were focusing on mentoring programs, you could have came up with how to start a mentoring program, or so, it could have been anything. But I like some of the things that y'all shared. But 2 things that I really wanted to bring out, and maybe we can get some other people to share here, is what was difficult about just that planning process of only having a short period of time to come up with some of the things that you need to spend your money on. Can we have some people just to share a little bit about that?
Miss McCready, you could go first.
It wasn't difficult. You just had to really brainstorm. You had to really think about, first you need to think about what we need, how, it wasn't difficult. You just had to really brainstorm. So, because I forgot about staff, but I was thinking some of this was already in place, and I was just going to spend the money on things that we needed.
Right. Absolutely. And so oftentimes, and the reason why I thought this would be a great exercise, because oftentimes as we're developing our organizations, and depending on what stage we are within our organization, whether that's in the inception or if it's somewhere where we have a little bit more seasoned organizations, oftentimes what we find is that we're making decisions alone, or we are, we have a time limit in how we make those decisions. And so having a group working together, working with a group really helped in brainstorming and thinking about, like you said, staff, paying staff, needing a building, activities, goals and objectives, and all the different resources that you'll need for your organization. So, yeah. So next slide, Olivia. So defining common pitfalls. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to define what is a pitfall. And so one of the things that I did was I went through and I did a search of different definitions of what is a pitfall. And out of all the different definitions, what I did is I looked at specific words, and I kind of analyzed and looked at certain words that kind of stuck out to me. And for me, some of the words when we talk about what a pitfall is that kind of really stick out is not easily recognized, something that is hidden, a danger, an unsuspected danger, or a trap or a snare. And so what I did was I wanted to develop a uniform or definition that we all could use. And that definition that I decided that I used was, and let me pull it up here. My computer's getting stuck. Give me 1 second. And so the definition that I came, I'm sorry, I apologize. My computer did some funny stuff here, but the definition that I came up with is a pitfall is anything that is considered unsuspected, a hidden danger that has the potential to affect an organization's time, resources, and participants in a negative way. And so when we start to talk about our time and how it affects our time, time is the hours that an individual or group invest in developing the vision, the mission, the goals, and the outcomes, and the constant monitoring and development that an organization requires because of growth. And a pitfall with time can be not using your time efficiently. Another pitfall when it relates to time is not attending to urgent things versus those things that are least important. When we talk about resources, in regard to resources, the resources are our inputs that the organization needs to run the program. And there are 3 things that we need to be mindful of when it comes to our resources. So we want to make sure that we are not wasting valuable resources and by not tapping into available resources. So that's one way that we can waste valuable resources. And for example, what I mean by that is if you, let's just say if you have a financial expert as one of your mentors, and let's just say you're talking about financial literacy one month, and you never include that mentor who is a financial expert in that monthly meeting on financial literacy. So that'd be a way that you would be losing out on resources. And then we have to think about the benefit. Are the benefits worth the cost of the resources, which is our cost benefit analysis. And then when we talk about the people or the individuals we serve, we're talking about our stakeholders in the community, and people, the participants, and the people that are affected when policy and procedures are not clear. So when there's no place and when there's no plan in place, generally when we're talking about people, we can set up a plan for a pitfall when we don't have a plan in place for our people as well. Next slide, Olivia. And so I'm not sure if we have any TA personnel on the call, but one of the approaches that we use when you are an organization and you're looking for technical assistance is that we know number one, you have to set up an account with the organization. And we start off with that request and that needs assessment. Once you are approved and you go through that initial needs assessment, there are some pitfalls that we can avoid. Or before we even talk about avoiding, but there are some pitfalls that arise during that process. And some of the first steps that mentors take through the initial process where pitfalls appear are in the needs assessments. And so I'm not sure if y'all familiar, but if you're a program that has ever applied for for technical assistance, you go through this initial needs assessment that you have to fill out. And it tells the organization what area that you are proficient in and some areas that you may need some improvement in. And so in that part of the process, there are some pitfalls that we will discuss later on and how you can avoid some of those pitfalls. And I'll bring those, talk about those a little later from that point of view. The next part is time management. So when organizations come in and they go through that TA, that initial needs process, and they are approved, and once they start working with the TA, one of the things that we run into is expectations versus reality. And I like to understand the program's expectations of the time they have available and the resources that they have to commit to the TA process. and the program. And later in the training, we'll talk about that as well. But as your program is progressing through that TA process and we're talking back and forth, and after that initial conversation, one of the things that I like to do is talk with the program and try to find out, how much time do they actually have to commit to that process? How much time do they actually have to commit to actually getting their program started? And so, yeah, so that's very important. When we talk about the facilitation process, that's the communication or the engagement between that TA or technical assistance and the requester. And the program applies, and programs apply at different levels, meaning some programs are just developing their organization, while other programs have been operating for a longer period of time, which I call they're more seasons. So we will be reviewing some of those common pitfalls that organizations can that they go through, and some things that they can save time and resources and people through the facilitation process. So in this section right here, and what I did with my approach is, if you're a TA, one of the things that we looked at is we broke this down into 3 different areas. So we looked at your program planning and management. We looked at program operations, and we also looked at your program evaluation. So we wanted to look at it through those 3 lenses. And starting out with the program management and the planning process, some of our common pitfalls start with just with the research and understanding the root cause of the problem. Most organizations lose valuable time because of the research. We have an assumption about what's causing the problem, and we have a belief that there is a condition that already exists about the problem, but we attack that from an individual standpoint, and we don't bring in the entire team when we're working with them. So that creates a pitfall for us. So one of the things that we need to do is do our research up front about what the problem is that we're trying to solve as organizations. And then not only that, but knowing how many people you would need initially to start the organization, and forecasting about the additional support you would need to developing and the sustainability of your organization. So just next figuring out what are your costs, what are your costs involved with starting the organization. These are all certain pitfalls that we have to kind of think about as we're developing our organization, and as well as how much time do you have to commit to starting and developing a program. And this is generally information for programs that are just starting out. Next slide. And like I said, this was my process for identification. And what I mean by that, this is how I looked at how I wanted to view pitfalls. And I looked at it from those 3 different stages. And as you can look at the list here, I broke it down into program management, program evaluations, and program operations. And these are the different levels that I will be addressing today, and talking about how these pitfalls are formed, or how they exist, and what we need to do. Later on, we'll talk about how we can avoid some of these pitfalls. Next slide. So starting out with program management in the planning process. So, and I think I just covered it. I'm sorry, I covered the planning process here already, but then we can talk about the board of directors and advisory board, inclusion versus self-planning for organizations in the formation stage, knowing where and who to recruit for your board. Some organizations start out and the executive director is your board of directors. Your executive director is the advisory board, and they're doing everything. And what we need, and so that causes a pitfall, because they're working all by themselves. And when they could be covering more ground if they were working with a team, learning how to develop a advisory board or a board of directors, knowing who to, how to recruit, where to go to find those people, and then what type of skills are you looking for that align with the organization's goals and objectives for those board of directors and advisory boards. Another pitfall that I find working with a lot of the programs that I work with is organizations that want to have a partnership with the school district. And some programs also waste a lot of time when partnering with school districts or with schools, because they don't understand the process for setting up a formal partnership with the school district. And so one of the things that I found out working with a lot of school districts is just knowing that process and what they need to do. And we will also touch a little bit about that and how to avoid some of those common pitfalls when you're looking to form a partnership with the school district. And then the next thing I covered up under the your program management was identification of stakeholders. When I refer to the identification of stakeholders, this may be for season programs, more of season programs that have been in operations for a while. If you are familiar with your lodging model, you know that we have a short-term, intermediate, and long-term outcomes. And primarily when we're looking at that 7 to 10 years, that's where we're looking at our impact and we're looking at system change. And in that system change, when we talk about the system change, we're talking about change that takes place on the program or the organization level, on a community level, or even a political level. And so when we look at it from a system level change, then we begin to have to identify who are our stakeholders in a wide range or a boundary. Who are those stakeholders, not just our beneficiaries, but those people who are looking to solve some of the same problems that we are focusing to solve. And we can run into time, losing time and resource problems if we're unclear of who our stakeholders are. And according to the NPC New Philanthropy Capital 2015 suggested firstly, being insufficiently open-minded when thinking about who a stakeholder is when mapping systems, we should be searching for potential allies, potential blockers, and points of leverage. This means thinking differently about who can help or hinder and considering whether there is a role for government, regulators, the legal system, or markets and private sectors. So a consequence for not knowing who your stakeholders are on a system change level is losing out on partnerships that could potentially help save your organization in terms of resources, time, because they offer similar services. They may be able to do that service more efficiently than you can offer it. So it's very beneficial to learn out who are all your stakeholders. And in the social sector, we are familiar with the language of stakeholders and are used to negotiating and responding to the actions of funders and state agencies. Identifying stakeholders is common sense. There are, however, some potential pitfalls that social sectors face. And so one of those is different actors have access to different points of leverage. And so that just basically goes back to say, knowing who your stakeholders are in that system change level and being able to work with them. When we talk about insurance, that's another component that I see a lot of programs have. They face a lot of different pitfalls when they deal with insurance. A lot of programs don't even know that they need insurance. Most organizations don't even know what amount of insurance is sufficient for participants and activities in their program. And then lastly, when programs operate without insurance or the proper amount of insurance, it puts the organization, the time, and people in jeopardy. So I think we all are familiar with the potential lawsuits, participant safety, and the loss of time committed to developing and running an organization. Next slide. And I think I may have just skipped something on the last slide, but I'm still going to cover it because I think it's very important. But program operations, some of the pitfalls that are associated with marketing is when programs' marketing message is not specific. And so they end up with participants with multiple needs, but the design of the program was only intended to improve, for an example, academic performance. So we got to be very specific when we send out our different marketing, whether that is some type of commercial, whether it's we're dealing with putting out a newsletter, being specific on who we are looking to recruit. Secondly, programs lose out on time and resources when they recruit the wrong mentors and volunteers because they don't have a formal mentoring plan, recruitment plan in place. And so that's very important to, a marketing plan in place. And so we can also lose time when we don't have that in place. And last, pitfalls some programs may experience are not having sufficient resources for monitoring and the efficacy of marketing strategies utilized by the organization. So all of these are pitfalls if they are not looked at or discovered early. Then we look at our closure process, in which organizations facilitate a match closure in a way that affirms the contribution of mentors and mentees. Oftentimes our programs, we do have an end of the year celebration, but we don't take into account when we have mentors or mentees that we lose prematurely matches because of so many different issues. And when there's no process in place, what happens is that it can cause a negative effect on our mentees, negative consequences for our mentees, including declines in indicators of functioning, such as self-worth and their self-confidence in their schoolwork. So another potential pitfall is the attrition rate. So when data is not accurately documented, reports can have an effect on stakeholders and funders program. And so then when we come to this slide here, we start to talk about the next slide, program evaluations. Yes, I'm sorry, that's why I should have stopped. But yeah, so we talk about program evaluation. One of the things that we discuss is the theory of change. And the theory of change is a way of thinking about your work that involves challenging its underlying assumptions and the reasons for selecting certain interventions and activities, as well as identifying outputs and outcomes, a causal framework of how and why the change process will happen in a particular context. And so when we talk about assumptions, we're talking about our beliefs about a condition that already exists about a certain problem. And oftentimes when we're working in groups or working in teams or we're working in organizations, we don't brainstorm or we don't come to the table as a group and put the different preconditions or the different things that need to take place or the different barriers that stops our programs from reaching those long-term objectives and those long-term goals. And then also working with the theory of change, one of the things that we do is from a TA perspective, one of the things that I do is I start with your long-term outcomes and I work backwards, and we begin to look at some of the preconditions and the things that need to take place in order for you to reach your long-term outcomes. And those are some of the things that we'll be talking about, how to avoid some of those common pitfalls as we work with creating and developing a theory of change for your organizations. And then lastly, when we talk about data collection and we talk about what to measure, and these two right here go kind of hand in hand because you have to, number one, know what you're going to measure before you can know what kind of data you're going to collect. And the major pitfall is sometimes organizations develop their goals and objectives and outcome, but are not aware of whether they will have access to that data and who will collect the data. So what if, for an example, so what if there's some delayed data that you want to collect, but the person that is collecting the data is not qualified? So those are some different pitfalls that we will discuss when we talk about how to avoid some of these common pitfalls dealing with data collection and what to measure. Next slide. All right, we should be coming to, and this is our list and priorities exercise. So in this activity, and I hope I'll be a little bit more clear on this activity than the last activity. So we're going to do the same format. We're going to break out into groups again. This will be our last activity. But in this activity, you will be deciding on which items are important and then taking all of those items and putting them into an order from least importance to greatest importance. And once we come back from our individual groups, we'll come back as a larger group and we'll review some of those questions that I have listed here on the slide. And we'll talk about some of the, and we'll call on some people to see if we have some bold souls to talk about what items would they choose first in developing or starting their organization, and we'll go from there. So can we start with our breakout sessions?
So to go to the reference. Sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind, and I think about you, knowing only you could understand. You're alone in my room. I can feel all the walls closing in. Feeling trapped in a shell. Wishing that I could stand the wings of change. 'Cause every degree has turned to stone, and the songbird has flown. I know the roads can change, ocean of blue. Okay, seems like everyone is back from the breakout rooms. Do you want to lead us in some discussion afterwards, Dr. Bridges? Oh, no, you're on mute.
Okay,
There
can you
we
hear
go.
me now?
Yes.
Okay, am I still sharing my screen, or do you see my screen? Or
No, I'm sharing the screen. What slide?
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. No, I just wanted to make sure. But I want to go over a few things here with this. Right here, just to lead this discussion, is I wanted to see if we can have each group share what their list entailed in terms of from least to greatest, or either from greatest to least. How did they prioritize their list in coming up what should happen first? Because they all had three different sections. One was looking at program operations, management, and another was looking at evaluation.
Well, I'll start with ours.
Okay.
And if someone in our group can help me
Mhm.
as I start, I know that you have to have a vision before you have the mission. Then the mission comes next. And then I was trying to write down all that Ms. Neal was saying.
Neal, I'm back.
The vision, you have to have a mission, then a mission, and then you start with your structure of how you want the program. Am I correct?
Well, that would be my thinking. I've got this little thing in my head that I use as a general approach to doing anything. And I start with purpose, process, and the payoff. And my payoff is what I want my outcome to be. So I would say that, as McCready said, you have a vision, and then you plan your mission, or you decide what you want your mission to be, which then leads you to what you want to accomplish. And that I see that being evidence in your goals and objectives. Now you need people to help you do this.
Right.
So the people that you need to help you do this become your stakeholders, and they have to buy into your vision and mission before you really decide on if you want them on your board, because you want people who will help you navigate. If it's finances, you want somebody who's going to help you identify your financial resources and how to identify them, how to get them, how to manage them. And the goals and objectives sort of dictate what your programming is going to look like, which then speaks to what your staffing needs to look like. So I think some of this is happening simultaneously. Like, even though you may have 12, 14 more things as you go through it to accomplish, you sort of have to organize how you're going to accomplish it. And, I think you get things done when you do it as a team. So no one person is going to take on all of this. You create ownership through participation and valuing what your team brings to the table. So you sort of divide the different tasks up and to get to the end point.
Okay. Can we have one more group to share? And just for the sake of time, we'll have just one other group to share and we'll move forward. And also, whatever group shares, can they tell us the items that was given to them, so we can kind of, all the other groups have an understanding of what they were working with? Because this group that I was in was working with the logic model. I think we were looking at goals and objectives and things of that nature, program planning and management. Do we have another group to share?
I'm sorry. I believe your name was Ian. Has anyone spoken from our group? I thought he was subscribed, so.
Yeah, no one has spoke yet though, but from our group.
Is he not still on?
He put it in the chat. If anyone else from that group wants to speak on what he wrote.
Oh, it's in the chat. Mhm.
Can someone,
He kind of went with what we were talking about too.
Yeah,
That strategic plan is good because, well, I already spoke
it's,
about group.
it's in the chat from Evan
Yeah,
Logan.
I was in the group with Ian, and we had the same thing. Miss Neal kind of spoke on everything that we had spoke on during that time of putting things in order and what should, come first or not come first. So I think everything that we had said have already been said by Miss Neal.
okay. So and that's just a mistake on my part because each group should have had a different list, and so probably everybody looked at the first list and decided to go with that instead of going through all three. There should have been something that dealt with program evaluation, but nevertheless, primarily what I wanted you to take away from this activity, and I want to share a resource just for time's sake. A resource that I wanted to share is a book entitled First Things First by, I think his name is Stephen Covey. And he says that the clock represents our commitment, appointments, schedule, goals, and activities, what we do with and how we manage our time. And the compass represents our vision, values, principles, missions, conscience, direction, what we feel is important in how we lead our lives. He also talks about the 4 quadrants and how we should do balance, how we should bring balance in relations to our what is important and urgent priorities. So in terms of our organization and working with how we list what we should be doing first, a lot of that depends on where we are in in the progress of developing our organization, whether we're starting out, just starting, recruiting mentors, getting an MOU with a school district or whatever the case may be, knowing what to work on first, putting first things first is mainly the message that we really need to understand. And that will save us a lot of time and money, resources, and people when we approach it from that perspective, putting things first things first. All right. And just for the sake of time, I'm going to run through how, which is the most important part of why we came, is how to avoid some of these common pitfalls. Next slide. And I'll try to run through these pretty quickly, but I thought they were very important and imperative to this webinar. So starting out with, like we said, we started out from the beginning talking about the request and that initial needs assessment that most requesters go through when they're looking for TA, technical assistance. And to avoid losing valuable time on the front end, making completing an initial assessment more inclusively. And what I mean by that is mainly working with other components in your organization. You may have a marketing director, you may have someone else who is knowledgeable, but including the entire team so that you get a better reading when we get your assessments, initial needs assessments back. Because if you are not affiliated or not working with the marketing or operations, then your knowledge level is going to be a little bit low versus the actual marketing director helping you complete that initial assessment. So to avoid some of those common pitfalls in the initial assessment of the need of starting the TA process is including your entire team. Second, we talk about time management and expectations versus reality. I'm primarily referring to the programs that are just beginning, or there's the smaller programs. And I like to use the proverbial. I used to use the proverbial when I coach, putting the cart before the horse. So they may have great ideas. The organization may have great goals, great expectations, but they underestimate the cost and the time that is required to run an effective program. So making sure that you're looking at the cost and benefit analysis of that, knowing when you want to complete that. Programs can determine early if the impact as specified in their plan is not beyond the scope of the program to achieve. And I'm not saying that one person can't run the entire organization, but you need a team. It'd be great to have a team, to develop a team, like a board of directors, use some advisory boards that can help with cutting down on that cost in the process and the time. And what criteria will you require from your board? Like I said before, what skill set will they need to have an expertise in a certain industry that would help you out. And when we talk about the facilitation process, this is for organizations starting out once again, and for organizations that are seasoned. Organization needs to include, like I said, the entire staff in the TA process. This allows the organization to work together as staff to help develop new ideas and moving the organization forward. And it also gives your staff a better understanding of how they fit into the bigger picture. So not including them, sometimes they don't know how they fit in and how they benefit the long-term outcomes and goals of that organization. When we talk about the planning process, like I said before, fail to plan, you fail to plan, you plan to fail. How often will you meet? Those are things that you need to know, and who will be a part of developing the agenda for the meetings, for these meetings. When we talk about our board of directors, the same thing. Who's going to develop these meetings, the schedules, the agendas? Who should be a part of these organizations? How often should we be meeting with these organizations? And so understanding our schedules and understanding these things up front in our organizations will help us to avoid some of these common pitfalls. When we talk about school districts in developing MOUs, one of the things that we first have to do is go onto the website, the school district website, and look at what is the criteria for partnering with the school districts. Some school districts don't require you to partner with the school district, but you have to partner with the school. And so understanding how that works, and then understanding who are the partners that need to be at the table when you're developing this MOU, like a legal team, the school district's legal team, your legal team of the organization, and ultimately the superintendent will sign off on the MOU. Next slide. All right, so now when we talk about system change, we're talking about program management. System change is a configuration of interacting independent parts that connect through a web of relationships, forming a whole that is greater than the sum. And so when we talk about system change, like I said before, we're talking about change that takes place on a political platform, in a community or social platform, those different types of changes. And one of the things that we, like I said before, when we talk about it from that perspective, one of the things that we have to think about are our stakeholders, because our stakeholders are not just those people that we are serving, our beneficiaries, but they're also the people that are trying to address the same problems that we're trying to address. And so when we know that they may have some type of assets or some resources that they use effectively and efficiently, and we're not doing that great, one of the things that we could do is partner with that organization and allow them to use their resources, since that's not one of our strong points. And that way we save time and resources. When we talk about program insurance, we talk about risk management. We did a workshop this past summer. We talked about risk management. So knowing to how to contact your broker and find out how much insurance that you need for your board of directors, or insurance that you need for transportation. These are all some things that you can do to avoid common pitfalls early on in the organization, in the planning process of the organization. When we talk about planning program operations, we are looking at a few different factors. We're looking at, number one, we're looking at a marketing plan. We're looking at a mentor recruitment plan, and we're also looking at a closure plan. And when we look at these different processes, some of the things that we need to do overall, and just to kind of sum it all up, when we're talking about operations, is have a plan in place of how we plan to work with when these different things arise. Like, for instance, if we have someone that leaves a match prematurely, what is the process that we have in place? How do we meet with that mentor, that mentee, and also the parent? And what documentation needs to be completed and filed with the organization so that everyone is involved with that process. And then just for time's sake, we want to look down at program evaluation. I just want to run through this real quickly and briefly. We're talking about our theory of change. we're talking about data collection, and we're talking about how to measure the data that you collect. And one of the things we want to say, we want to be clear on our objectives of the program, what initiatives or activities will help accomplish those objectives. Next, understanding your KPIs, your key performance indicators, developing those indicators for your targets and your different segments. And I think my last final thoughts that I would like to leave with you all is primarily when we're talking about evaluations is just being clear about your assumptions about the problem. Because if you have an assumption about the problem, you want to make sure that you can develop a fundamental truth. And I always say you can't really develop an absolute truth, but you can develop a fundamental truth based on those indicators that you come up with, based on the research, based on the data that you come up with, and compiling all that so that the research can defend your assumptions about why a certain problem or a certain condition exists about that particular problem that we're trying to solve. And so I tried to just go through all that. Next slide. I wanted to kind of just run through all that real briefly because I know for time's sakes, and these are some of the references I took, so you can definitely look at that if you need to go back and see where I took some of the information and how I got most of my information. Most of this information was also taken from our 4th edition of Elements of Effective Practices for Mentoring, in which I tried to align a lot of these different concepts to those elements of effective practice. And so that's all that I had to share today. Next slide. Do we have any questions?
Yes, any questions? Thank you so much, Dr. Bridges.
Yes.
If you have any questions for him, feel free to unmute yourself or drop them in the chat before we head out. If you could also fill out the evaluation on today's webinar, that would be great. You literally can just use your phone and hover over the QR code and a link will pop up at the top of your phone. And it's a quick eval. It just helps us, learn what works, what doesn't work, because we do put on a lot of trainings. So we want to make sure that they're as effective as they need to be. So any questions? No questions? I mean, that's always good. It means you were very clear.
Well, thank you all for definitely for taking your time out to be a part of this training day. It means a lot to me, and I hope that you were able to take away some pointers that you can take back to your organization and help further the mission and vision of your organization.
Will any of Dr. Bridges' slides be available to us in in a way we can access it?
Yeah, I can email them to you. We normally send them out to all those that complete the evaluation. So I can email you those slides. And then for the second activity he had, I'll also send a shared Google Doc where you can see the different ones that he was talking about versus just the group one that we looked at. But to be able to see how do you prioritize program operations and how do you prioritize program evaluations? That way, if you want to do this with the people at your organization, you can.
Okay. Now tell me again what I need to do with my phone in this square.
Okay, so turn on your camera. Okay, yes, you have your camera up. Yep, and it should just hover over focus.
This little square.
Yep.
And it says open in Chrome, so.
Yep, so you just tap that and that should take you straight to the evaluation.
Okay, what's happening? Alrighty. Okay, apparently I'm not tapping the right thing.
Do you see?
I've got the square encompassed in, the little outline.
Mm-hmm. And then do you see a notification at the top of your phone? And it should say open and then in quotations, Survey Monkey.
Okay, it says open in Chrome.
Yes, so you go ahead and you tap that notification.
Okay, it's happening.
Yay!
Look, you don't know, that's a major accomplishment for me.
Well, I'm happy to help. Yeah, so you could just anytime you see something like this for a QR code, A lot of companies are making them so you get quicker access to things like evals or, you know, just registration forms or whatever. So I'm glad you now have that under your belt.
Okay.
But all right, I mean, if you don't have any more questions, I mean, obviously stay on if you want to ask him anything, but thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for filling out the evaluation. Thank you, Dr. Bridges, for this great webinar. It was very useful. And then hopefully we see you guys at the summit Wednesday through Friday. Yeah, so thank you and enjoy the rest of your Monday.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you
a
all.
good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.